Good afternoon and welcome to October 3rd, Downtown Rotary. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd ask you to recite with me the four-way test. It should be on your table there. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you, and I now ask Andy Patterson to come forward for the invocation.
Please bow with me. Dear Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day that you've given us and for all the opportunities that you place before us. We ask that you guide us as individuals and as a Rotary Club as we seek the good for all in our community. Lord, specifically today, we ask for your eyes to see those who are struggling, those who are left out in our community, those who feel disconnected. Lord, we just thank you for people who are working to connect those individuals, to reach out and see them, especially the work of the group we're going to hear from today. We ask that you would direct their efforts and give them success. In your name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Andy. I want to take a moment to thank our greeters and welcome our guests. If you are a guest of Downtown Rotary today, I'd ask that you please stand and we'll welcome you. We have a couple, three special guests I'd ask that would stand again, and that is Leah Bossler from Lincoln High School, Raina Moss from Sioux Falls Christian, and Lainey Vandewater from Jefferson. So our junior Rotarians here for October, and we'll hear from them later in the month. Welcome. All right, excellent. Well, some Rotary business today. I'm glad to be with you today while Cindy is traveling. And we have two new inductions today. First, I'm going to ask Jason Herbolt to begin making his way forward. And he has a new member to induct. Welcome, Jason Herbolt.
Thank you, Tony. Fellow Rotarians, it is my great privilege to introduce new member Jared McIntafer. Jared is a native of Pierre, South Dakota, and graduated with his BA from South Dakota State University and his master's and PhD from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. His wife Jessica is a graduate of South Dakota State University as well and grew up in Rapid City. Jared has joined the Dakota Institute for Business and Economic Analysis in 2022. Jared brings a passion for growing and improving the South Dakota economy, along with a history of providing business leaders and policymakers with valuable insights and analysis. Prior to joining the Dakota Institute, Jared was the CEO of Benchmark Data Labs in Rapid City. At Benchmark, he led the organization, becoming a leading source of data and analysis for the business, nonprofit, and government sectors. While at Benchmark Labs, he authored numerous reports focusing on issues of housing, regional labor markets, and economic development in South Dakota. Prior to joining Benchmark, Jared was an academic economist. He was a faculty member at Penn State University from 2017 to 2019, where he taught courses in economics and statistics. Prior to that, he was a graduate instructor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and a research assistant at the Bureau of Business Research, where he co-authored several studies analyzing the Nebraska economy and labor market. It is my great privilege to introduce Jared. Come on up, Jared.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hope it's still morning. Good afternoon for those of you whose clocks say differently. Thank you for welcoming me today. I'm excited to join Rotary. Careful not to push the podium off. It's a pleasure. As Jason said, I'm somewhat new to Sioux Falls. My wife and I moved here about 6 months ago for me to take my position with the Dakota Institute. I'm an economist, but I've met a couple people in the audience, and I think they'll testify that I'm not actually a terrible person, and I'm somewhat interesting to talk to. So I'm glad to kind of be here, get enmeshed in the community, meet new folks, build connections, and I think that's kind of what excites me about Rotary is the ability to meet people, to engage with the community, find ways to be involved, and to really learn more about Sioux Falls. It's an exciting community. For the last few years, I have been in Rapid City, so I guess I'm trying to shed my West River distaste of East River. Just kidding. I grew up in Pierre. Everyone hated us, right? With that, I think that's all I kind of want to say. I'm excited to join the community, excited to join the group. I look forward to meeting all of you over the days, weeks, months, and years to come. So, thank you.
Jared, welcome to Sioux Falls and welcome to downtown Rotary. It's got to be a fascinating time to be an economist. We look forward to learning from you as we navigate the current environment. Next, we are going to introduce Aaron Clayton as our newest member. Aaron Clayton is a partner at Eide Bailly here in Sioux Falls. In addition to serving clients, Aaron assists with the recruitment, development, and oversight of the audit department, and is the partner in charge for telecommunications and the electric utility industry practice for Eide Bailly. Aaron has been engaged, like many of our Rotarians, in the community and both a variety of professional and not-for-profit organizations. Those include Junior Achievement of South Dakota CPA Society, South Dakota Healthcare Financial Management Association, Habitat for Humanity, Steering Committee for Sioux Falls YPN, American Institute for Certified Public Accountants, Young Member Leadership Committee, the Governing Council of the IACPA, and the Business Leadership Council for the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce. One of Aaron's proudest achievements is being awarded the 2021 Outstanding Young CPA by the AICPA. Aaron is a husband to Shelley for 18 years, and they have 3 daughters that are 15, 13, and 7, and 1 son that is 1. Please join me in giving Aaron a warm Rotary welcome.
Thank you all. Lots of familiar faces out there. Just want to take the opportunity to thank Tony for the invitation to Rotary. Looking forward to getting the opportunity to meet many of you and also learn more about the organization and all the good things that it does in the community. As Tony mentioned, Aaron Clayton, partner at Eide Bailly, have been in the community for a long time, so not new to Sioux Falls at all, but definitely new to Rotary, and again, looking forward to meeting many of you and getting to learn a little bit more about the organization. So thank you.
All right, once again, Aaron and Jared, welcome to Downtown Rotary. Now we are joined by our panel, led by Rotarian Andrew Curley, who will moderate the conversation. And on stage with him is Connect Sioux Falls co-chair Heather Krause and Siouxland Librarian Director Jodi Fick. And they're going to talk about the effort around digital inclusion. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Andrew Curley to take it from here.
All right, thank you, Tony. Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to present a little bit about Connect Sioux Falls and the work we're doing here in the community. To get us started, we actually have a proclamation from the mayor for this week, kind of highlighting why we're here today, why this week. So I'll go ahead and read that to kind of lay the foundation for this conversation. Whereas the City of Sioux Falls recognizes the vital importance of access to the internet for the success of our community and residents. Whereas in the digital age, educational outcomes, economic mobility, and full participation in our society, democracy, and economy are tied directly to information technology capacity of all individuals. Whereas the COVID-19 health crisis shed light on the need for home internet service and the barriers certain households in Sioux Falls face in obtaining this service. Whereas Connect Sioux Falls was founded in order to identify barriers to broadband that exist in Sioux Falls and develop a community-based approach to combating these challenges. Whereas Digital Inclusion Week 2022 is sponsored by the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, representing more than 600 affiliated organizations working together to reach our common goal, that all people have access and use of the internet and the tools they need to use it. Whereas Digital Inclusion Week 2022 aims to raise awareness of solutions addressing home internet access, personal devices, and digital literacy training and support. Now therefore, I, Paul Tenhaken, Mayor of the City of Sioux Falls, do hereby proclaim October 3rd through the 7th, 2022 as Digital Inclusion Week in Sioux Falls. And I urge all residents of Sioux Falls to join in recognition of this significant occasion. Signed, Paul Tenhaken, Mayor. So that kind of lays out what we're here talking about, but I think digital inclusion is kind of referenced a lot in this proclamation. Digital equity is another term kind of along those same lines. So I think it makes sense to start our conversation kind of definitionally, what is digital inclusion, what is digital equity as we talk about it. So Heather, let's start with you. What's digital equity definitionally for you, and why is it important?
So digital equity, you know, what drove me into this is this concept. I didn't really know what digital equity was. It wasn't something that was a term I was well aware of prior to the COVID pandemic. I think a lot of people became aware of it. But it's making sure that everybody has access to affordable and reliable devices and broadband support. It's pretty simple. Can you access the internet? Can you afford to keep it on in your home? And do you have devices that are connected to it and work properly? And then on top of that, adding the piece, which is why the library is so essential in this partnership, is the literacy aspect. It's not just about having a device in your hand and being able to connect to it, but do you know how to use it? Do you know how to navigate all of the resources available to you on that?
Jodi, anything to add to that?
And I am going to add to that. Being in the library world, I've been in libraries for 35 years now, and digital equity has been an issue that the library has been aware of throughout that. When I started, we were all just starting to get computers. The very first down here at the Sioux Falls Public Library, we had some of the first computers that the public could even try to use. If you had a quarter, you could get 15 minutes on that first Mac. Throughout the years, we've added computers and added instruction because we were always aware that computers are really important to our life, to our businesses, but people don't necessarily have access to them. The library was in this area, in this arena, before it was even known that there was an issue out there. When you go down to the downtown library or to any of the other libraries, you will see computers available. Our staff also helps people with using those computers. So digital equity, to me, when it gets down to it, is having the computer access, but also the knowledge as to how you can make your life better by making connections through that computer.
Yeah, and I would just add from a kind of industry perspective, we hear a lot about the phrase digital divide. And really that's two prongs. There's one aspect of it that's the access, that's the infrastructure. You're talking about rural areas, you're talking about remote areas that have challenges. They don't have the fiber in the ground or the wireless gear on the towers, that they don't have the physical access to connect to the internet. That's one prong of it. The other prong is adoption. It's you have the infrastructure available to you, but you don't have the means, or you don't have the devices or the literacy that we're talking about. So when we talk about digital divide, there's two aspects of it, and one I think gets talked a lot about a lot more, and we're trying to shed a little light on this other one, because in the City of Sioux Falls, we do have the infrastructure built out. It's what are those other barriers that are keeping people from connecting to the internet? So let's talk a little bit about what is the challenge in Sioux Falls. We said digital equity, but what's the current status in our community? What are the gaps that we've been able to identify?
Well, in our community, when we're just looking at just the numbers, because I like numbers. So by the latest census, 15% of the homes in our community do not have internet access. Some of those people It's by choice. For many of those people, though, it's because of affordability.
So we're talking like over 20,000 people.
Over 20,000 people.
So that's a lot of people left behind. That's a lot of people without access. That's a lot of people just trying to figure it out. And, you know, it's easy to say, well, there's resources. There's the library. And people have access to internet at public places. And, you know, that might be true. But, everybody's got a cell phone. Because it's true. Like, over 90% of people in the nation have a cell phone. And a majority of those are smartphones, right? So we have access to get online to do these things. So when we say somebody doesn't have access to the internet, we're not saying that they don't have a computer, don't have a phone, have no means of getting online. It's just messy and it's fragmented. And if you think about where we sit in your life, I'm very blessed, I'm very privileged. I have a smartwatch, I have a smartphone, I have a tablet at home, a computer, I have a desktop computer. Anywhere I go, to some degree I'm connected. It's kind of frightening. I think the internet knows where I am at all times. I'm very connected. And the future of our world, whether we love it or not, or like it or not, is more connected, from healthcare to finances to getting your COVID vaccine. What did you have to do in order to sign up for your first COVID-19 vaccine? You had to go online to do it. And if you don't have a means to do that, how are you going to do that? If you're already questioning whether or not you want to get it, and now we've made you jump through 10 hurdles to do it, you're probably not going to get it. And so then not only are you falling behind maybe digitally, but maybe your health is going to be worse off because of that. And your economics are going to be worse off from that, because the future of investing in a lot of capacities is working online. And not that it hasn't already, but using new apps and resources to do that. And so the problem is not just singular. It's very fragmented, it's very unique, and it just spills into every other aspect of your life. And so one of the challenges we go up against is trying to understand the impact of it. It's just simply trying to imagine living your life without the internet at your fingertips, shutting your internet off, not having a phone that has access to the internet. And it can be really challenging to kind of pull people on there, but once you really start thinking about how much you use the internet or your mobile device on any given moment in the day, it starts to become pretty clear that without it, it's pretty problematic to not have that access.
Well, and many of our people in our community, they have internet access at your workplace or at your school. But when you get home, I don't have internet. And then came COVID.
Yeah, that's a good segue into COVID-19. I think, Heather, you referenced it earlier too, but how did the COVID-19 pandemic really highlight this issue for the city of Sioux Falls? And what were you seeing at the library, Jodi?
So at the library, when COVID happened, we did shut down the libraries just like most of the rest of the world for a period of about 6 weeks. When we reopened, we had people just at the door trying to get connected, come in, and the library computers was how they connected to their families. They were how they applied for jobs, how they filled out their forms to get their COVID benefits. And then at the library personally, because of COVID, we had a large number of computers, but they were all sitting right next to each other, so we had to drop our computers down to half, which meant that the waiting period, even just to use the computer, became quite lengthy. My staff went into help like overtime. Our staff pride themselves on the assistance that they can give to the customer, to the person coming in. And it was hard to keep them from not being out there helping folks all the time, because the need was so huge. It was so huge.
Well, and just even to think about how our own lives were disrupted, the ways that we had to learn how to utilize tools that we were maybe not utilizing to a specific degree. A lot of companies were not engaging in video conferencing and were forced into that had they made that choice. So then you're navigating not only a willingness to want to do it, but then from an age, gender, education background, whomever your employee base was, you're trying to catch people up to a certain level of utilizing a digital tool that they'd never used before. I mean, how many times do we have to remind people you're on mute, or your video's on and it shouldn't be, or maybe you should turn your video on? And these are silly moments, but at the same time, like, it's really stressful for people to have to go from not knowing anything to utilizing it every day in your workplace to be successful at your job. And then if you're not catching up to the same degree as your coworkers, you're kind of feeling left behind. You feel like maybe embarrassed by that. And that's such a small example for people who are already struggling in so many other aspects of their life, putting food on their table, you know, deciding how are we going to get all of our 5 kids to the 3 different schools they go to. One of us works a 12-hour shift. The other one is ill with COVID. How are we going to make all of this happen? The school just sent out a text saying, check our website online for information. Well, we don't have the internet, or we don't have a phone, or our phone just got shut off because we don't have enough money to keep it on because we had to choose between putting food on our table and having access to the internet. And these are real choices that people are making. And the 211 helpline, Betsy Schuster there is a part of our group, and she was really educating us along the way to say, it is so hard because the 211 helpline, their greatest resource to people is saying, we'll text you. That's the best way that they can get information to people calling into them, is to text them in information, text them a form, a link to a form. Because a majority, or a lot of the people that end up calling 211 helpline sometimes don't have an email address. So then they have to walk them through how to set up an email address, and then make sure they have access to a place that they can go check it. And if they don't remember their email address, I mean, it's just, the complication mounts.
And now add 2-factor authentication. How
Yes.
many of you have put that into your businesses? That has been such a challenge for people who aren't really that aware or that technologically savvy to add that additional factor in. We just added even more elements.
Right, so if you need to sign into a new organization or a new form, and they're saying, we're gonna text you a code to make sure that it's you, and then once we text that code to you, we're gonna send you an email, and you need to go into your email, and you need to click it and verify your email, and then once you do that, you need to go back in and log back into the website, and imagine that the only way you can do any of this is on your phone, which I feel like I'm pretty digitally savvy, but sometimes I want to throw my phone out the window because it's so frustrating, because not every website is digital friendly, and sometimes the print is so dang small. And I'm pretty young, but my eyes are not. And so it's really frustrating. And for people who speak a different language or from a different culture, or their age or their intellect, for whatever reason, makes it challenging for them. It just compounds it, and it makes you just want to disengage. But we live in a society that you can't, unfortunately, because that is the future of where we are headed.
Yeah, and I think you both touched on it well, that COVID-19 really highlighted this issue, in that, particularly for like an education space, all of a sudden your child's ability to go to school was all of a sudden dependent on whether or not you had strong internet access at home. I think the schools were really they probably were aware of it, but it really highlighted for them, oh my goodness, this percentage of our student base they can't go to school because school is based on the internet. And I think it just really shed some light on this, hopefully in a good way, that there's going to be some solutions now available.
And what's great is, a lot of organizations ramped up and figured out how to make it happen. They innovated. And the library has had tablets that they send children home with. And so then there's this, they get sent home with tablets, but then what if you have 5 kids with 5 devices and they're all trying to stream video at the same time, but they're in a family or in a home that can't afford the high level of broadband services needed to make sure that all works well. And working digitally, nothing against Midco. I love Midco, they're my internet provider. But every once in a while things would go down. We have lots of storms in town, and then all of a sudden you're completely cut off from your ability to do your job, from your ability to connect with people. And even for homes, during the COVID pandemic, we heard a lot of stories of places where people, especially like college-age students, where there was only maybe one device in the home, and it had to be shared with their younger siblings doing homework, their parents looking for a job in them. And it just, the complication of it all made it really challenging for those families.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what we are doing in Sioux Falls to try to address this issue. Talk a little about Connect Sioux Falls, but let's start with IDEA, and kind of this is a little bit of a rebrand I kind of want to share with everybody. But Jodi, you want to talk a little bit about what IDEA was and how this kind of got started?
So back in 2020, when we were all now just starting to come back, and we were recognized that, oh my gosh, we have all these kids out there in schools. The schools really worked hard to get some type of internet, But this is not a good permanent solution. So at that time, Mayor Paul Tenhaken sent out a call, and we had 18 people answer the call from across the community. We had education leaders, both the public schools and the colleges. We had business leaders. We had nonprofits, anyone who had some type of a stake in this issue. And we formed the IDEA Task Force, which IDEA, I could never remember the acronym, but IDEA was the Inclusive Digital Equity Alliance. And so we started gathering by Zoom. Those first meetings, we were figuring out our Zoom and how to get everyone together. And we started gathering and defining what we thought the issue was. And Midco was gracious enough to give us a grant to actually hire a consultant at the national level, who then led us through the process of really understanding what the issue is like in the Sioux Falls community. We were looking at Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County and deciding and figuring out what we needed to understand the problem before we could try to even look at what some possible solutions are. We did that by surveying the public. So we sent a survey out and got a tremendous number of results. I think within 1 week, all of our results were statistically viable. And so the community heard us and talked about what their internet was, what the problems were, what the access was. And then we also did our own survey of our own mapping activities to kind of look at what neighborhoods were in most need. And so that was IDEA.
And the surveying, I work in market research for a living, so my job is to do surveys and focus groups and collect feedback from individuals and tell their stories. And the ironic piece of running this survey is they're like, here's your survey link. It's an online survey.
Online.
We're like, wow, okay, that's not gonna do it. And so we really had to ideate on how are we making sure we're talking to the people that are actually struggling from this? Because if we're doing an online survey to see what the link is between the digital divide, that doesn't work. So thanks to the library, we sat there at tables with computers and people walked in and we said, hey, you want a free bus pass, or do you have time to sit with us for 5 to 10 minutes and walk? For many of the people, I sat there for a couple hours one day, I had to do the survey for them. Like the element of not being able to navigate a computer, understand how to click through a survey was really challenging. And so it took a lot of kind of grunt work to really understand. And I think where we've received the most value in this initial phase is those conversations that we had with people in real time. One person who's not on the stage but should be is Patrick Gale. We're going to call him out at that table from the Sioux Falls Community Foundation. People like Patrick who are part of this group are so deeply rooted and connected in the community and could just share story after story after story of what does that mean to say 15% of the people aren't connected, and what do they want to do. And it was really simple things. We found out that they just want to be able to do their schoolwork, apply for a job, and even in a lot of cases, get on social media. And frankly, who are we to judge them wanting to be on social media during a time when we're all closed off from our friends and family and we just want to feel connected, right? And so imagine just not having that ability to do a FaceTime call with somebody who's sick across the country and you want to connect with them. So once we got that data back, we did kind of, like she mentioned, looked across our city, and we weren't surprised to find where in Sioux Falls maybe the people were struggling most to get that access. And when we zoomed in, we started to find these connections that they happen to be in neighborhoods where Title I schools are. They happen to be really close to a lot of the nonprofits that are already serving them. And so we started to say, okay, if we know where they are and what maybe some of the communities and what they're doing, we started to find those partnerships with the school district, with nonprofits nearby, with the community foundation, and said, what's the biggest thing that we need to tackle? And it was frankly just awareness. Because we had been handed the silver platter from the federal government saying, there's the Affordable Connectivity Program. We will give people internet and access to devices for free if they are eligible. So we were like, oh, people just need to know about it. So that's really the major focus, is that we've been trying to run this big awareness campaign so that people that need this resource go and get it. We didn't have to build a solution for them. We just had to connect them, which is our rebrand from IDEA, which was really hard for all of us to remember, to just Connect Sioux Falls. Like, let's get people connected to resources, to digital literacy, to the internet.
Yeah, I have to talk about that just a teeny bit. When you talk about the change, we defined problems, but in the middle of that, there were activity happening at the federal level and at the state level that changed some of the things that we had to focus on. We are not, Connect Sioux Falls is not about building broadband infrastructure. That is happening in other areas, but we are about creating this awareness, and that's part of why we're here today.
Yeah, and you want to talk a little bit about, we were talking earlier about some of the statistics on awareness, because as we identified, so I guess maybe some folks who aren't familiar, the Affordable Connectivity Program, it's administered by the FCC at the federal level. This came out of, originally it was part of the American Rescue Plan Act, and started out as the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and then with the Infrastructure Act that passed last fall, it became a permanent program. So it's a $30 credit that eligible households can get towards their monthly broadband subscription. But it's eligible families, if you're eligible for other federal programs, if you're on SNAP, if you're eligible for Medicaid, WIC, Pell Grants, there's a whole kind of list of the other federal programs. If you're eligible for those, you're eligible for this, if you're at 200% or less of the federal poverty line. So there's a great program out there, $30. And I can tell you from like a Midco perspective, we've got a package specifically for this program where you can get a 100 megabit broadband connection for that $30. Your gear is covered by the $30. So it's free internet up to 100 megabits per second. We just need to get people aware of it. So let's talk a little bit about what some of those opportunities are to make people aware.
Well, and just to add to that as well, we identified providers in town. Selectel is one of them. They're a wireless provider in town. The person that owns that franchise business is just really passionate about giving out to the community. And so another piece of the Affordable Connectivity Program is a device. You get money towards a device. And so Selectel specifically was pulling in devices that somebody could come in and get a smartphone, a nice smartphone, not some used smartphone that's half broken, like nice brand new smartphones that somebody could come in, get connected to the internet, and walk out with a cell phone and suddenly have that connection. And then there was an additional piece for an extra $12, get a tablet as well. So if somebody walks in and they get to walk out with a smartphone, $12 for a tablet, they've helped solve an issue for their community. And so many people just didn't know about it. And when we first heard about Selectel, we were connecting with them saying, well, how are you letting people know about this? Word of mouth. They hadn't been running because they were testing it out. And so just through word of mouth, they would have like 100 people show up in a week. And then they'd have to like stop talking about it for a week so that they could get the next shipment of phones in. And then they'd get like 200 more people the next week. And it was just this insane amount of people coming in just because they didn't have access to this stuff. And a lot of the people with our awareness campaign that we're trying to inform is they might actually have internet. There were many times my mom would walk into our kitchen, open up all of the drawers, and we had one box of mac and cheese for a family of 4. And I don't know if your kids ever ate mac and cheese. I can eat the whole box. So like, it wasn't much food for a family of 4. And there are so many families out there that are like, well, maybe we have to take the internet off for a week. And that actually became really problematic for the 211 helpline and for the original program because it had to showcase like, how long did you have your internet off to get eligibility for certain programs? And 211 helpline said, that's not how it works for people living in poverty, because 1 week it'll be off, or 1 month it'll be on, then it'll be off, then they'll be able to have the money to put it back on again. And there isn't just this easy trajectory to say, oh, you've been struggling for a certain amount of time, now we can help you. It just, poverty changes month by month for people. And so we really wanted to raise awareness to say, you don't have to be pinching pennies to leave your lights on and put food on your table. Get this support, and it's $30 less a month that you're having to spend on something that can go towards your family or go towards gas for a fourth a tank of gas. And that compounds the problem now. We're out of the meat of the pandemic, but now we're in inflation. And now we're in this looming economic crisis. And so it's this raising this awareness that the pandemic may be over, but the support that existed because of the pandemic is still very much there. And as business owners in our community, we want you to help be a vehicle to this information. We want you to be able to share with people in your base. You know, I'm looking at the Sanford Health table. I mean, you guys are employers of so many individuals, and you might have salaries that are seemingly great to help pay the people that are working there, and the salary is great, but what if they're supporting a family of 7 and that money gets stretched thin? That's stories that we heard from Smithfield. Is the salary at Smithfield for most people, the average salary was what, like $75,000? That doesn't make it sound like you're living in poverty, but if you're supporting your grandparents and your children and everything, and it gets stretched so thin that it does become really problematic for you. I didn't mean to call Sanford out, like they're not paying enough. You guys are doing a great job. I'm gonna get an email later from former Sanford people. I used to work there. I'm a big fan of Sanford. But just making it aware to the people that you support as you know, hey, if you don't know about these resources that are available to you, or especially the patients, right? You drive them into the space of, if you're food insecure, how do we help them out? And I work for Mayo Clinic. I've really challenged them to say, when somebody comes in and you see that they're at risk in the food space, housing space, et cetera, let's just add in digital as well, and make that a resource that we provide to them.
And I think if we can get more broadband into people's homes, so if, heaven forbid, we have something happen like COVID again, we don't have our schools scrambling to figure out how to get these devices with internet out to the kids. And we don't have people sitting in their cars outside the library trying to use the public Wi-Fi and deciding, do I put the heat on now or not? You know, so it's really crucial that internet access is in homes.
Absolutely. So obviously awareness of ACP is a big focus. What's next for Connect Sioux Falls? What's digital equity look like, success look like for our community?
So, like I mentioned previously, we're really working to create partnerships across the organization, handing these pamphlets out, showing up at the health fairs, Health Connect, working with Sioux Falls Thrive to get it into the school systems and the communities that we need to, working with nonprofits to, does the Bishop Dudley House have this to hand out? Does St. Francis House? Any of those spaces, even thinking about like the Children's Inn, women who escape domestic violence and have to start all over again, have nothing with them, and they have to go move into a new apartment and figure out how to afford internet access so they can look for a job. All of these places where we can just get this information out there for individuals. And the push for us is to say, call 211. They'll walk you through it step by step, how to do it. So you don't even know, as a business leader or a community leader, you don't have to know how to do it. Just advise people that it exists and get them to 211 helpline. And then the other piece is digital literacy. We're working to create a pathway for establishing a resource in our community to help individuals of any background, intellect, or need learn how to use their cell phone. So if we're going to tell people to go out and get a cell phone and then they need support using it, having a space. And so I'll let you share about that.
Yeah, and I would say that's another thing that changed at the public library with COVID. Prior to COVID, my staff would say, there's the computer, I'll help you log on. After that, it's all up to you. Since then, we've taken a much more proactive role in digital literacy and in assisting people, where we help people learn how to upload that resume so they can get that job. We help people learn how to digitize their personal pictures. We have equipment and printers and all of that stuff at the public library. So we are working hand in hand with people now, but very much on a one-to-one basis and an as-needed basis. Our next steps over at the public library are to formalize our tech help so that you could set up times for like a half hour working with someone that they'll like help you get your computer set up or help you learn the basis of a program. We're also going to be, thank you to the Community Area Foundation, applying for a grant so that I can get some more staffing to do more computer classes.
This is our pitch to the Community Foundation. We would like a lot of money.
We're working on our end to see what that looks like, so that there are inexpensive, as in free classes for the public, for any person to come and increase their digital skills. And that might be learning how to do word processing, or it might be learning how to use Excel, but it's also just learning how to use social media safely. How not to click on that link in your email and take down your work system. So,
And what's really wonderful about this work is every step that we've gone and every partner we've engaged with, we've learned about all these incredible resources in the community that we just weren't aware of, which means the general public probably isn't aware of it, and businesses aren't aware of potentially. SEAM is an organization that will take your technology from you in a workspace and clean it, and then restore those devices and sell them at a cheaper cost, or in many cases, sometimes they'll even donate them. So that's a way that they're recycling used devices and getting them to the people that need it. There's AARP, we heard, has an OATS program, which is Older Adult Technology Services. And they have a program where they've created a Train the Trainer program. So you can get trained by AARP to then train people on how to use a device, how to do certain things. And they'll do that for free. They'll teach you how to do that for free. And then all you need to do is find the staff and the ability to lift that infrastructure up. And so there's just all of these incredible programs out there that offer this support, which is why Connect Sioux Falls made so much sense to us, is we're just gonna go out there and find it and make all of the connections. And I think a great example that I have brought up, when I originally was part of this program, I was an employee at Sanford. And Sanford has something called Tech Point. When you go into their hospital, there's this awesome little Sanford-esque, kind of like an Apple store, where you go in and it's this beautiful space where you get to walk in, and if you have issues with your devices, they're there to support you. And not just if you're an employee, which they do a lot for their employees, but if you're somebody who's been in the hospital for a week and you're like, I lost my charger, or they're telling me to go onto my chart to find all these updates and I don't know how to do any of this, they've got somebody on staff to walk you through this process in a really comfortable and inclusive environment. And so right away, I was on the call with Stacy Reitzman at Sanford and Tech Point saying, how can we let's duplicate this all over the city of Sioux Falls, because it's they've created this beautiful infrastructure, and we've been in talks with them to say, can Sanford have pop-up Tech Points? And can we invite First Premier Bank to show up and work with that infrastructure to teach people how to do online banking for a day, teach people how to sign into their chart and understand healthcare, which is already complicated, but now we're trying to put it on our devices. It's frustrating, and it's not easy. And now we want to do telehealth visits online. How do we do that safely? How do we trust it? How do we protect our data and our privacy in the process of that? As we digitize our lives more, it's going to become more complicated to understand. I'm an educated individual with a master's degree. I still don't know how to do a lot of this stuff, and my wires get crossed and I get frustrated in the process. And so as we look to the businesses in town, we just ask you to be thoughtful. What's our role? Is it internal? What's our role in the community? And I keep talking about Sanford because I work in healthcare, but they're building this beautiful digital hospital. How is that going to succeed in our community if we can't make sure that people are staying connected and understanding how to utilize that? And same with banking, and same with the nonprofit space, wherever you're at, education. It really requires you to make sure that you're not leaving more people behind the more you digitize. And so it's challenging. We don't have the full solution for you, but we make the promise that we're really working to try and find those connections and solutions so that our community knows more about it.
Yeah, I think that's really good to point out too. We talked a lot about the ACP and the affordability side, and there's now this resource available to people. If affordability was your barrier, there are solutions out there for that. But we know that the adoption side of the digital divide is not just about cost, it's also about, do I have access to a device? If I have a device, do I know how to use it? And then just a recognition of just how empowering that is to have the connection and the ability to use it. And what Heather was talking about with healthcare, with banking, with finding jobs, there's so much more to just getting online. I don't think we all realize just how much of a lifeline it is for us. I was at an industry conference last week and somebody made the good point of when we sell a broadband connection, that's not ended to itself. We're the connection, the lifeline to the rest of your life, what you're doing online. And if people, I think that's why the mayor is passionate about this, is pushing city community resources online and into the digital world. If we do that, some of us are going to have access to that. If we leave certain segment of the population behind, whether it's because they can't afford it or they don't have the skills to utilize it, we're going to have kind of a two-tiered society of people who are online, know how to use it, and people who are left behind from that. And that's why we're all so passionate about this, why we think it's really important.
And the people that are left behind are statistically lower income, people of color, older adults, and the rural population. People that already have a lot up against them, right? It's already a struggle for people in the rural space to access really good quality health care. That's changing, thankfully, and innovation has helped that, and expanding in those spaces has helped. But the rural population is struggling for a lot of reasons, even just the broadband lines being in those spaces, especially if we talk about tribal lands and access to broadband in those spaces. So then those lower income and people of color, like they're the people that are left behind in so many other capacities in life, and this is just one more that adds to additional challenge. And so as somebody who's extremely passionate about health equity, and that's my work at Mayo Clinic, digital is a piece of that, because if we're pushing everything online with the hope that, let's say virtual visits, for example, meeting your doctor online is known as being a less expensive way to engage in healthcare. Great. But if you don't have a means to do that, and we're trying to push people online, then you're further leaving certain engagement and people behind. And so it just can sometimes exacerbate the problem if you're not paying attention to that issue.
We touched on it a little bit already, but let's go back to how can people want to get involved or people want to be part of the solution? What's some advice or what things they can do?
Well, first of all, to be a part of the solution, we have this small solution on the ACP. Get the word out. Tell your employees, tell your family, tell your community that there is some funding available to help. And maybe they don't feel like they need it, but it certainly will help in this time of a lot of inflation. The next thing is work on yourself. So for each one of us, there are digital skills that we don't have. We need to all be working to understand and learn more. So if you think you're at the top, you're not yet. So just keep working on your things. And the next thing is just to continue supporting those who are working in this effort. Come down to the library, see what's coming on, see what we're doing out there. And I'm just going to do a selfless plug. If you aren't using digital books yet, the library does have them. So get your smartphone out and download that book.
And I would say, work with your experience teams, work with your marketing teams, evaluate the process of which you're asking your consumers to go through the funnel, right? If they're becoming a new member of a bank, what's that funnel look like for them? How many touch points are there? How many of them are online? And think about the accessibility of each of those. Is it accessible to somebody who is blind or deaf? Is it accessible to somebody who speaks another language? Is it accessible to somebody who has a 5th grade reading level, a 3rd grade reading level? And obviously it's gonna, dependent upon your industry, who your target consumer is, will determine how much of an effort you're gonna have to put into fixing certain funnels for your patients or your consumers. But being thoughtful about that. And then on top of that, think about how are you getting new employees into your system and what is that experience like for them? Because if their first couple days of getting onboarded make them nervous because it's highly digital or the language isn't there for them or they're just not feeling connected, think about that from their perspective and try and live through that lens, because you might be able to find a really quick, in the same way that we did. It's like all of your surveys online, how can you make that more accessible to people? So there can be really small ways that you can find adjustments in your system to make it more accessible to a population that is continually diversifying in our community and changing.
And I would just add, I think we're always looking for other community partners. As Heather kind of talked a little about this, as we've been going through this effort, we're identifying, this group was doing this that we didn't realize, and it ties into the work we're doing. I'm sure there's some of you out there that in your day-to-day roles, you're thinking, I've run into that problem with this constituency I'm serving. If we want to connect with you, we want to help be the solution, help provide you these resources that are out there. I would say, for one thing, we're kind of a building it as we go kind of organization. We're almost all of us are volunteering to be on this work. We're getting support from the City of Sioux Falls.
We're not getting paid.
Right.
I'm teasing.
But so we're adding more and more partners to make this effort impactful. We referenced a couple of them: the Community Foundation, AARP, Helpline, others. I would also note that Lawrence and Schiller have been working with them on website resources. So right now we're based at the Siouxland Library's website. So it's siouxlandlib.org/connectsf. We're also working on make that, and correct me if I'm wrong, whether that's live or not.
I don't know that it's quite live yet, but it soon will be.
ConnectSiouxFalls.org will eventually be the house, will house all the information with this organization. How people can, one, get the resources if they need the resources, but also how can people get involved in this effort. So we've got a lot of community partners that have helped us get to where we are today, but we're always interested in more. So if you've got an organization that you're working with that you think wants to be part of this effort, we'll take it.
Or if you're doing something already, like in your place of business, that you think can be modeled elsewhere or that we can learn from, like I work from home, I don't get to see people a lot. I'm all about meeting for coffee and learning from people. So let us know if there's something we don't know, or if there's somebody in your organization that we should know and would want to sit in this group and help us find solutions. That's really welcome as well.
So I think that was all of our conversation. We do have maybe a minute for one question or two.
I know. We had a couple people.
Thank you very much for the program. Very enlightening. Love the mission. Fully support the mission. My question relates to, you mentioned 20,000 roughly citizens in Sioux Falls area right now. Obviously, we continue to grow as a population, continue to grow in a lot of diversity. My question is, how are you tracking? How are you tracking success? Because you can continue to see where it would just perpetuate into more and more and more. I'm just questioning how you're tracking it.
What's really nice is there is an online tracking system with the Affordable Connectivity Program. They track it online, so you're able to see by a month how many people have signed up for the Affordable Connectivity Program. So in that capacity, we're able to see if it's more people doing it, then we hope that it's because of our efforts or because the awareness campaigns are working. So there's a little bit of an ability to track it that way. And then in terms of hopefully when we have programming available, just tracking signups and making sure that people are engaging in this work and starting to track the numbers of people that we're supporting. But it is a big challenge. It's really hard to capture, but our partners like Midco, I know, have a lot of data available.
Yeah, I mean, I think we threw out the 20,000 eligible households in Sioux Falls. Right now, it's about 3,400 people in Sioux Falls are signed up for ACP, so obviously there's a big gap. And that tracks pretty closely with the national numbers of it's roughly 20% subscriber rate for this program, and it's an awareness challenge that the White House and others are trying to work on. So that seeing those numbers go up, it's definitely going to be part of the success. But we also talked a little bit about in our organization, this work will never be done. You kind of want to create an ecosystem where digital literacy and digital equity are part of the conversation, and there's community resources out there. But there's always, you might solve somebody's problem. There's going to be another individual that right behind them who's going to have challenges as well. So I don't think that we'll ever say, well, everybody's got all the skills they need, everyone's signed up, nobody's got an affordability issue. So the problem never go away, but we want to make sure they're creating kind of that infrastructure and ecosystem that's going to help solve for that.
Since we are broadcasting across the state, I think it's important to point out this has nothing to do with the presence of fiber in like rural communities. I see Nikki Gronley's here, the Reconnect program that's putting fiber across the state. The governor's Connect South Dakota, which is another investment into fiber across the state. But I'm grateful for this initiative, Connect Sioux Falls. So I had some questions. One, with the eligibility that's on the form that you put on the tables, is it just any one of those that they meet the criteria?
Yep.
That's probably true, okay. Yep. And then secondly, I just had a text conversation during this meeting with an individual who I know for a fact would qualify for this, and he confirmed that he's not getting it. but he is paying his bill monthly, and then he gets it disconnected, and then he'll reconnect. Is there any proactive approach from the providers to say to those who establish that pattern of disconnect, reconnect, disconnect, reconnect, to say we have this for them?
Yeah, I could talk at Midco. That's definitely part of our effort of, because of course with any federal program, getting eligible as a participating provider was not easy, and there's a lot of rules around what we can and can't do from a marketing and sales perspective. But yes, trying to sync our systems to say if this person is non-pay or at risk of disconnect, making sure they're aware that they potentially could have a resource available to them. But then we're also doing our own efforts. This is obviously Sioux Falls specific, but at Midco we're promoting this across our footprint to make sure people are aware of it. But it goes back to the lack of awareness in a lot of areas. But that's a very good point of like, how do you make sure, because what we see when we have people sign up, it's not just new customers. It's existing customers who maybe were having those challenges or are at risk of potentially needing to be disconnected, making sure they know. So actually, majority of the people we have that are Midco subscribers on this program were already customers. They've just now have this credit on their bill.
And one thing I'll note too is we've been informed from the ACP program that there is not going to be a system like where ACP gets cut off and then all of a sudden these people start getting charged an amount that they can't afford. There is a system in place to advise and connect to them, and from what we're seeing, it's not going away anytime soon. I mean, the federal government has made it really clear. And what's good is we just applied for funding with the federal government through the state of South Dakota to get a lot of money to support the state in that capacity. So thank you for calling that out, because there's so much work being done across the state to build those fiber lines, to get people connected. And I think it's been, I'll let you speak to that because I know you know more.
Well, yeah, no, that's a really good point. So when this program got started, it was called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, as I mentioned earlier. It was temporary. It was supposed to be for the COVID-19 pandemic. That one led to challenges of people not wanting to sign up because they thought it was going to go away or they just didn't trust it. Part of the infrastructure bill, they provided $14.2 billion for this program with the intention that this would be funded for at least 5 years. And with any federal program, once you get it up and running, chances are you're going to keep funding it. So it's intended to be a permanent program that's not going to go away, and hopefully to address the people who thought maybe it would. So some of the funding, the funding that Heather was referencing is that there's part of the Digital Equity Act was part of the infrastructure bill, and that is for states to develop digital equity plans and then implement them. So we're hoping we're kind of on the front edge of that. Some states are just starting from scratch, or some communities just starting this work. We'll hopefully have our organization kind of already up and running so that once some of that funding comes available to implement digital equity plans, we kind of already say, hey, here's our plan, we just need some funding. And that funding is coming down through the state.
And what's been great, sorry, one more note, is we have actually met with the mayor of Topeka, Kansas. We've met with members in Boston, Massachusetts, different states and cities that are doing this work. And the plan that we're enacting is mirroring theirs. And some of them were ahead of us, but had the same exact plan and saw great success. So we've been connecting with different communities to make sure we're on the right track. And it sounds like we are.
Yeah, maybe one more before Tony cuts us off.
I never thought I'd get the chance. I appreciate the fact that you guys are doing this and doing the proper thing with federal money. So many cases like this. In fact, this plan with the FCC was actually put in place more than 6 years ago. It was there before I retired from Midco, and that was 6 years ago. So it's nice to see it's finally rolling out, and it's doing so because it's funded. I also appreciate the fact that you guys are putting together a knowledge base, technology, training, those type of things available at a lot of different sites. You're looking for more partners. My question is, what are you doing to bring that level of support to the people? Just saying, we've got it, you need to come to the library to get it, you need to go to this place to get it, isn't good enough. Because people who don't have the internet, a lot of them figure they don't need the internet and won't need the internet until they see what the internet does. And that means that you're probably going to have to ultimately to get down to the bottom line of going to where the people are. And I'm wondering if that's part of your plan as well.
That's exactly where we're at right now. And I so appreciate that perspective, because it's about going to those places. So for example, Sioux Falls Thrive has a Kid Link program where they are engaged at Laura B. Anderson School, and every week they go there and they host events, and the community and the family can come. And they've made connections with people who needed a new home, and so met with the Sioux Falls Housing Association and were able to buy a new home with that support. And so we're looking to have a presence there. So we're trying to work with nonprofits, work with those mobile food pantries, and get into those communities. And we're trying to do like, what's the lowest hanging fruit? Raise awareness. What's that next level? By January, we're gonna be starting to really try and come up with some more hands-on, working in the library to establish programming. So taking it step by step. And there's gonna be some people in this community that just don't wanna be connected. So we're trying to find the people in the middle, the people that are already there, the people that are never gonna want it. Who are that people in the middle who we can move? And we'll start with that lower hanging fruit and just build and build and build. But that's exactly right, being in that community. So that's what those flyers are, is we're trying to vet those partnerships in places where we can have those conversations with people and get them through that process and start them through it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Tom. And I think one example that I know this group is familiar with, the community soccer program that I talked about 2 weeks ago. That's a group that we've had conversations with too about, can we go to an area where we think a certain portion of those folks would be eligible for this program or be in need of this assistance. We're trying to identify those opportunities. So yeah, absolutely right, go to where the people are to help them identify these resources.
It's about building relationships and trust. Building relationships.
All right.
And Jodi, on those well-said words, we'll wrap things up. But thank you, Jodi, Heather, and Andrew, for shining a light on this important topic. More to come as your work continues. And as you said, Andrew, this work will continue on indefinitely. As we turn to the rest of October, we have 4 more Mondays leading up to election date on November 8th. And we have some election topics coming up, starting with next week, the initiated measure prohibiting new slaughterhouses within city limits. We'll have Christine Erickson with Sioux Falls Open for Business join us. That's part 1 of a 2-part series on that topic, which is getting a lot of conversation. Brendan Johnson will join us the 24th, and he is with Smart Growth Sioux Falls, representing that group, to talk about that. October 17th, we'll have the gubernatorial debate here, and then October 31st, we'll talk Medicaid expansion. So you're going to want to be here the next 4. If not to hear the junior Rotarians, you're going to want to hear our programs. So come back the next 4 weeks. We look forward to having you then. With that, have a great week. Thanks. Next week, we will be at the Washington Pavilion, Belbas Center. Week at the Belbas, at the Pavilion.